Kia ora, welcome to Women in Data Science Auckland. This year our conference has actually gone online and it's a series of talks featuring women working in the fields of data science across New Zealand. WIDS Auckland is an independent event organised by the University of Auckland Faculty of Engineering to coincide with the Global Annual Women in Data Science Conference. I'm Kate Kolich, WIDS Ambassador, and I'm delighted to be helping share these inspiring talks. Today's speaker is Ernestynne Walsh. Ernestynne is an experienced senior data scientist at Nicholson Consulting. Her speciality areas include data transparency, privacy, and ethics, particularly around predictive modelling and creating frontline operational models, along with explainable algorithms. Ernestynne has been involved with Women in Data Science since 2017, but in 2018 she was a panelist, and this year she is actually going to be sharing some of her learnings from her career as a data scientist, which I'm sure will be very useful for aspiring data scientists.
Cool. Kia ora koutou, ko Ernestynne aho, e mahi ana o kia Nicholson Consulting. Hi there. My name is Ernestynne and I work for Nicholson Consulting. It's a very diverse team, and the great thing about that is we get to enjoy many benefits of having different perspectives. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. So we're going to look at what is diversity and why it's so important, where we are at now, and the bad news is we've still got a way to go. But the good news is I will show you how we can go about making a few changes to improve things. All right, what is diversity? He ha tēnei me te kanoro. Tēnō pai ki o tēnei whakatauki. I love this quote. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So it's about embracing, I guess you could say, what makes us different and acknowledging it. So that's inclusion and diversity. Where are we now? Kei hea tātou I naenei. I like to think of the situation as this science, technology, engineering, mathematics cheese wedge. So what I mean by that is we do quite well in terms of female graduates. So you can think of having a big chunk of graduates, but then if you look at how many have a STEM background, there's a smaller amount. If you look at how many go into the STEM workforce, then it's smaller again. And if you look at how many stay, that's smaller. And if you look at how many are in leadership, well then that's almost like the cheese hole, it's non-existent. So what we want to do is, if you want more people and you want a more diverse workforce, then you've really got to get rid of this wedge shape and you've got to end up with something more balanced. And I think this is really important, particularly for data science, because of fairness and addressing bias issues. Now, you can easily Google this, you can read books, and you can find countless examples of where women are disadvantaged. And these can be things from being more likely to have a serious injury in a car crash, right through to being disadvantaged because certain medical apps are better at putting recommendations forward to males as opposed to females. And I would also say that it's not just a gender situation. You can also see this from an ethnic point of view as well. So some of you may have seen the example of a black person trying to use this automated soap dispenser. And he's laughing to himself and he's complaining that he's too black. So the automated soap dispenser just doesn't work for him. So how does he fix this? He gets a white paper towel and covers up his black hand, and then the soap dispenser works. So he was having a little laugh about this. people who watch it are probably having a little laugh, but sometimes you can get situations where it's a bit more serious. And when I think of the New Zealand context, I think about things where our Indigenous population, our Māori population, end up disadvantaged because of the data we have available, it's biased, and also the models themselves end up being biased as well. So it's really important to have this wide range of people, wide range of thought perspectives, so that we can make sure that we're addressing these issues. You could imagine that, need to cut that out. Okay, attempt 2. You could imagine that if we got to a situation where people don't trust these models, they don't really believe in the products, they're not really made for them, then why would they provide their data for them? Why would they buy these products? And we really need data. Data is what we build our models off. So if we've only got half the data, we're only going to have half the picture, and we're going to continue to reinforce these biases. Okay, so we know there is a problem out there. How do we fix this? Ka pehea tātou whakatika tēnei. I'm going to look at this from 3 different groups. First up, the scientists. Then we'll look at where most people will probably end up working for a business. And we'll also look at where a lot of people do their learning. So what can we do for academia? So first up, the scientists, our kaipūtaiao. And I think we've got this situation, this cheese wedge, mainly because we have a situation where the expectations do not match up with the reality. So I'm going to look at what we can do to balance those things, to encourage more women and more ethnic groups to come and join data science and stay there. Okay, so I think there's 3 things that I'd like to suggest for our scientists. First up, I'd like to suggest that there are many roles available that are related to data science. And it's good to know about those because, 1, it might be that those things excite you and interest you more, so you should pursue them. The other situation you can be in is where you might actually join these roles first, and then you move sideways into data science. So just as a couple of examples of related roles, testing is a big one. So normally when I work in a data science group, we have testers working alongside us. And they need to be able to look at many different perspectives to check that our data science products or our data science services really acknowledge all different perspectives of what could happen so that we have a better final solution. So what we do there is we normally have the testers working right alongside us from the beginning, and that means that they see the data science parts in action. So these are the people who could help us with the racist soap dispensers. They'd probably pick up on that sort of thing very quickly. The other areas, for instance, communication, storytelling, building a narrative, people who are quite interested in those sort of visual elements would do quite well in this space. I know a lot of places when I work in this area, they get really excited about the videos that we make and how They say, oh, it's so easy to grasp what's happening. We can understand the story, why you're doing this, what value it has. So that's another exciting area. But I think a really good hands-on example of looking at having a different role and using it to move sideways into data science is one particular project I worked on as a technical lead. And we had someone who came from an engineering background. So they were an expert at making sure that the code was optimized for performance. They would make sure that it was stable, reliable, it was monitored, everything that you need to have an operational data science product. They were fantastic at doing this. They didn't have a data science background, but they were very keen to learn about it. So we said, okay, we need your excellent skills that you have right now. And in return, we'll show you how you build an operational predictive model. And that was really exciting for them. It was a hands-on example. So they got to see exactly how they might go about getting into data science. The next thing I would say is know what you want, because that can really help balance out the expectation versus reality. So for instance, if you are really interested in using the latest, greatest tools, the fanciest algorithms, perhaps even inventing the algorithms, then you would probably be better suited for a research and development role or working in academia. So you probably wouldn't enjoy it as much if you were, say, doing business rules day in, day out, that sort of thing. So that could help you narrow down what roles you should go for to find something that you really enjoy. On the flip side, maybe it's more important for you to make an impact, for example. And at that sort of situation, it's probably better that you are closer to the customer-facing roles. So maybe you're working in a customer product team, or if the organization provides services, maybe you work in one of the service delivery lines. So knowing what you want to do can help narrow down what sort of jobs or roles that you want to apply for longer term. The final thing I'd say for our scientists is to know what makes you unique. And I think that really acknowledges diversity. So as an example, if I picked myself, often I'm asked about privacy and ethics matters, or about a te ao Māori view, particularly when it comes to Māori data sovereignty. So I know those are things that are fairly unique to me, and that's sort of my unique value proposition. So often what we find is that the data science job adverts are very cookie cutter, stock standard, and they don't usually mention those things that make you unique. So I heard a really good example the other week where the chief customer officer talked about we need to look at how do we better serve our Māori communities. So scientists might not think much about that, but there could be people out there who do have a STEM degree and they've spent a lot of time on the marae, they're familiar with tikanga, they can speak a bit of te reo. Those skills wouldn't have been mentioned in the job advert. But if you start talking about those sorts of things in an interview, a manager can go, oh, actually, those are some really good skills that we could do with right now. So knowing what makes you unique and sharing it, bringing it to the table, can also help make sure that we've got a wide range, a more diverse group of people working in the team. Okay. Let's look now at the business side of things, our pakahi. So in terms of managing that expectation versus reality situation, I would say role clarity is one of the biggest things that could help us manage that. So a lot of the times, what you find with university is that it's very focused on the lectures and the content, and people can sometimes get this assumption that that's what it will be like in the workforce. So I think to balance that, what we should look at, particularly the businesses, is making sure that when you do these interviews, someone who's currently in the role is present in the interview, so they can give a first-hand account of what it's like in that job. And the data scientists who are looking at that job can ask questions and get some feedback to help for them figure out whether or not they'd like this particular role. You could take it a step further if you were looking at a couple of data scientists and you had them shortlisted. Perhaps it might be worthwhile just having an hour where you bring them in, they get to meet the team, and they actually get to see some of the work firsthand. That could be really good because sometimes in an interview you may not know at the time the questions you want to ask, but then by seeing something in action, you go, oh, actually, I didn't think of this question, and then you can start asking that there and gathering more information. The other thing about role clarity is to make sure that you are clear what a typical work week would look like. So I've worked with some great places where they say 20% of your time is going to be spent innovating. And what they mean by that is essentially you've got a day to do whatever you want, you know, try things, see if they work, see if they've got potential. If they don't, then that's okay. So it's sort of almost like having that little R&D role for a day. So I've seen places that actually do this and it's been great. I have seen places that have suggested this, but because there is so much work on, no one actually ever spends that day doing the innovation. They spend the entire day delivering other work. So it's not that they're saying, no, we've gone back on the 20%. It's just that the team feels that there's so much pressure to do other work, they feel like they can't spend that day innovating. So if you are offering a innovation time slot, then make sure that it is clear that people should be spending that time working on that and not something else. The other thing I would say is look at breaking barriers. And it's really interesting. I've worked with both male and female data scientists, and usually the males will see particular barriers. So often I hear that, oh, we can't access the latest tools, or we can't access the data, or we don't even have the data. So it's sort of like broken this, broken that, pakaru tēnei, pakaru tērā. So they tend to look more at, I guess you could say, the bureaucracy of things as a challenge. Whereas there is this other barrier that I see popping up as well. And it tends to be the females that mention this. So that particular barrier is around, I'm not adding value. I don't see myself having an impact. So for that sort of problem, where you can't see the value in what you're doing, I would suggest looking at the board or whoever's in charge, looking at their strategy and looking at how they measure it. And then having this drift down the organization. So it gets to the point where the data science team has a value proposition, they can measure it, and it aligns directly with the strategy that the board has set out. So that can help with just making sure that things are in alignment and you feel like you are actually contributing to the why we're here, the vision. In terms of the more bureaucratic situation where you don't have access to tools or you can't access the data, what I'd suggest for that is it probably involves a mindset shift. So for scientists, eventually you're going to hit the situation, if you're in the workforce, where you have the IT versus business friction going on. So IT looks at being very stable and often managing risks. So they put certain policies in place. And sometimes the data scientists can see those more as inhibitors rather than protectors. So the business tends to look at what value are we delivering. They don't look at the same sorts of things that IT is looking at. So in that situation, I'd say try to line up or look at what risks is IT trying to manage versus what value the business is trying to get, and see which one is winning out. It might be that the value outweighs the risks, so it might be worthwhile looking at new tools or accessing data. It might be that once IT explains the risks they're trying to manage, that the team has a better understanding and can look at new tools, but at the same time take into account the risks that are trying to be managed. So by changing that mindset, it should help break down some of those more bureaucratic IT versus business style barriers. The last thing I would say is that if we want people to stay, we need to look at the opportunities for growth as well. So I know it's branded as the sexiest job of the 21st century, but even though data science is seen as that, after a while it can get a bit stagnant like anything else. You can get used to it. So what I would recommend is knowing what your data scientists really love doing. What do they want to do on a typical day? But then also looking ahead to the future, where do they see themselves in a couple of years' time? And by knowing that, you can give them roles that really help them to grow. It could be something like next time round, they work on a different product where they've got to learn about a different business area or use a new data science technique. It might be that they're looking at leadership, and so next time round you give them additional responsibility. Or maybe they're so interested in a particular area, maybe of the business, that they decide that a secondment would be really exciting. So just looking at these will really help ensure that data scientists still feel excited and they really love coming in each day and wanting to do their job. So that can really help with the retention strategy. Okay, last up, we'll look at academia, sort of the educators, our mātauranga. Okay, so first up, to really help balance that expectation versus reality, it helps to have the practical content. I have never had to use a moment generating function in my life at the workforce, but from time to time I have actually had to use the surveying techniques to readjust weights on surveys. So sometimes some of the technical knowledge is very useful, other times you never use it. So I think this is also very helpful when I suggested know what you want. If you are looking at getting into R&D or academia, then absolutely the technical deep dive is a must-have. If you're looking at a more typical kind of job that you'd see in government, for instance, something around building products, then you probably don't need as much technical information as you may think. Sometimes even just plain old business rules can get the job done. So it's interesting when people ask me what was my favorite data science topic, and I tell them it was sports management. They're sort of like, hey. And the reason for that was because it had an entire module on moral and ethical dilemmas, way before data science ever made that a thing. And the other thing I really enjoyed about it was the fact that the content was really practical. So we had a CEO come in one day and he had this strategy that he needed to implement, but he was stuck on how he would go about implementing it. And he came into our lecture and he was looking for our ideas on what we could do. So it was really practical. Our lecturer warned us, don't you dare throw Maslow's hierarchy of needs or anything like that. Very theoretical. He wanted practical, pragmatic solutions. So we started to think in a way in that course that was really helpful for going out into the workforce. If I had to pick a topic that was more technically focused, I would say that the warranty analysis course I did was the most practical. And the reason for that is because we were told to define a business problem that we were going to address. We were given real data, and I really do mean real data, real shitty data that needed tidying up quite a bit. So that also is something that data scientists do spend a lot of time doing. So we got hands-on experience doing that. We had to do the analysis, of course, do some programming, but more importantly, we actually had to present back what we found in a plain English style that was easy for others to understand. So we sort of almost got an end-to-end example of what a data science project might look like in the workforce. So that could have easily been a very theoretical, dry reliability style course, but instead it was highly practical. It was very useful for me when I had to go out into the workforce. The next thing I would say is to look at the role models who are available and try and get role models that reflect a diverse range of people. So interestingly, I went back and I looked at our university that I went to, and I was curious for the engineering, the computer science sort of area, which is where AI would sit. I wanted to know how many female lecturers were there. So I went back to the website and I counted them up, and it was less than 10%. So it's really hard to see you in a particular role when all the people in front of you don't actually look like you. So it has this really blokey kind of image that needs to be addressed. And you can see that flying on to other areas as well. I mean, if there's no lecturers, no academics who are female, then you also see that the research and the articles that are coming out are predominantly by males. So if we could change that, then the scientists who are coming forward could actually say, oh, look, there's someone who's like me and they're doing this job. I could see myself in this role. So I know there are some really good organizations who are working to change this, like Women in Tech, for example. But we need to push harder. We need to make sure that the scientists of today can name female role models. It was interesting, I saw a survey where most of the time when you ask for who are the leaders in computer science or technology or data science, usually the first names that pop up are male. So how can we go about changing that and having some female role models who really do aspire or inspire the next generation? So these role models need to be highly visible. We need them as mentors. We need to make sure that when there are conferences, There's not just the one token female, the one non-white person. We really need to show a wide range of ethnic backgrounds and also balance up the gender situation. Finally, I would say that there are many different paths, and this can really help with balancing out that expectation versus reality situation. So, of course, you do need to have some lectures and understand the more technical content, but it's all, I guess, about a balancing act. So how much technical content you need, how much practical content you need, and that can really depend on what type of role you want to do. So in terms of additional learning paths, I would say that getting that hands-on work experience is so important. And it's great to see that universities these days are having a mandatory component where you need to go out to the workforce and see what it's like hands-on. You can also see that there are internships. Again, there's only a finite number of these, but definitely go for them. Even if you don't get them, there might be other ways of looking at additional learning pathways. You know, tutoring, even just interacting with other people, giving them feedback. Feedback is a really good experience, particularly if you're getting into leadership. How do you give feedback constructively? How do you make it useful? So even tutoring can be useful. And there are so many other ways of looking at additional learning paths. It might be that you look at mentoring. So finding someone who has recently gone through the struggles and asking them how did they work around the challenges of getting into data science and, I guess you could say, staying there. So I'd like to finish up by reminding you that a lot of people do think of this data scientist role as a unicorn, this amazing individual who can do anything, can everything. But in the workforce, you have a data science team, and it's not a clone of amazing individuals. It is a team of people who are good at different things. They know what makes them unique, and then when they come together, they have a fantastic skill set that can really make a better product. So I'd like to leave you with this whakatauki. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, e toa takitini. This talks about how the successes are not down to the individual, the successes are down to the team. So that is the many faces of data science. Kia ora.